show for playoff football, River Valley Touchdown Style. I'm Martin Freeman.
Brad Caldwell.
He's got a lot of information for you today. We've got lots of good games coming up tonight, and we are looking forward to covering things a little bit differently during the playoffs. We're going to have previews on Friday nights, recaps on Monday, and Brad, man, we've got 7 teams in action. Russellville playing Sylvan Hills, their first ever meeting. Morrilton playing Parkview, their first ever meeting. Dardanelle playing Jonesboro Westside, their first ever meeting. Same with Danville and Yellville Summit. And then you've got Pottsville Robinson, and then Hector's on a bye. But tonight's game of the week, the featured game, the one that is going to probably draw the most attention throughout the River Valley, Lamar hosting Atkins.
It's going to be a fun one. I'm going to be there. We're going to have some people out. We're going to have one at Russellville for sure. We're going to try to get our folks out that cover Dardanelle for us when we're not able to go over there. So we're going to have some highlights of some games tonight for sure. We'll definitely have stats from Morrilton. We'll have stats from Pottsville. That's actually the great thing about doing a Monday show. And if you don't know already, if you didn't see in the title, we're actually going to do a Monday show versus a Friday night show. But that'll be the good thing about it. We'll be able to give you a more complete look at everything. But, man, I'm excited about being at Lamar tonight. That Lamar-Atkins game looks to be probably the most evenly matched of the games that we have in the River Valley. I'm excited to be there.
Man, the only thing bad about that game is that somebody's got to lose, you know?
Right.
These are 2 great teams locally that we like to watch play, teams that are going to be fun. This might be the most fun game to watch out of all of them as well. So the fact is one of them's going to have to go home tonight, so that's tough. Lamar started 8-0. They lose their last 2, and now they show them what they've won. They get an Atkins team that's playing well and who actually started out 6-0 and fell a little bit there, faltered toward the end of the season, and now they're trying to bounce back, and now they've earned a trip to the playoffs and play Lamar. So it's going to be a fun one. As you mentioned, there's a lot of offensive firepower to be had in that one.
Well, if you look at Lamar's schedule, basically the back half of the schedule, they played all their easier teams but Danville. Danville, the first game, they played a tougher game. Every other game was kind of a lesser game for them. Then they get to the back half of the schedule, Greenland, Mansfield, Boonville, Charleston, and now Atkins. And, the thing is now this is definitely a toss-up game because you've got one team in Lamar who set it off. I mean, one of 10 undefeated teams left in the whole state at one point. And then all of a sudden they lose 2 games. You know, the Boonville game was understandable. The Charleston game, I think they may let Boonville beat them twice, although Charleston is playing a lot better now. So Atkins is kind of the same way. They let Danville probably beat them twice. They played one of the worst games that I've ever seen. No offense, Atkins fans. That's just how it is. They played one of the worst games I've ever seen played when they played Mayflower. They just didn't look like they wanted to be out there, but they rallied the troops, and even though it was a loss against Glen Rose, they come back and played a very good game against Glen Rose. I think they got a little bit of confidence from that game, and then, of course, they played Two Rivers, and they did what they were supposed to do against Two Rivers. So now tonight you've got 2 very evenly matched teams from 2 tough conferences. I mean, I was actually thinking about this today, Mark, about what conference do I give the edge to in this game? Is it the 3A1 with Boonville, Charleston, Lamar, Greenland, and Mansfield as your 5 playoff teams? Or is it the 3A4 with Glen Rose and Danville and Mayflower and Atkins? Of course, Arkansas Baptist is probably not as good as the 5th team out of that other conference. But, man, those 2 conferences are tough conferences. This game, if I had to choose anybody, I couldn't right now. I just could. It's just I'm not sure. It's a toss-up game. You look around the state, look at publications. They're picking this game a 1-point game as it is. It's just going to be a fun one to watch. I'm glad to be there.
Absolutely, man. I watched Lamar play several times this year, and I like Coach Jones, man. He knows what he's doing. I watched him make adjustments on the sideline, and I really feel like he's going to make a great game plan. And then you got Coach Cody on the other side, who's another great coach, and they've just got guys, man. I know you're going to mention some of these players that are players to watch tonight, but they've just got guys on top of guys who can play, especially offensively. I mean, obviously defensively they're good, but these guys are fun. These guys are offensive-minded coaches, and that's kind of their niche and their forte, and that's kind of what you've seen from these teams.
And just a couple guys, Ike Peltz was the guy, the quarterback for Lamar, has had a really good season. He's 54 of 104, 744 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Jacob Parmenter's a guy that we have been mentioning quite a bit this year. 122 carries, 814 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And then he's also got 11 catches, 218 yards. That's a heck of an average, by the way.
Yeah.
11 catches for 218 and 2 touchdowns. Man, those two really carry the offense there for Lamar, although there are other guys that pitch in as well. And one thing that stuck out when I looked at Atkins was how many guys they actually do get the ball to.
Yep.
Eli Robertson has thrown 186 passes, 90 completions, almost 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. So Robertson was a kid that they thought about at the first of the year, kind of a question mark. He's done a good job. I look for him to be one of the better quarterbacks next year in the area. Gage Ream, 69 carries, 433 yards, 7 touchdowns. Also, let me throw this at you. He's going to get his 100th tackle tonight, 98 tackles on the year. Trey Davis is a guy that we mentioned a lot, very explosive, 34 catches, just a shade under 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kennan Martin, 27 catches, 422 yards, 7 touchdowns. And if you don't know by now, since we're talking about it, this is the St. Mary's Regional Health System Game of the Week, Atkins versus Lamar.
It's going to be an offensive showdown. I look forward to seeing the score. I bet you this. I'll say this, and then it'll be a low-scoring game, but I would not be surprised at all if these teams were both in the 30s.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me a bit. But, man, it's just one of those things, man. Playoff football is a little different. Are they going to be nervous? Every time it comes down, a lot of times when you look at games like this, it comes down to who turns the ball over. So I look for that to be the difference, is who is going to take advantage of the turnovers. And if they, if it's Lamar, especially with Atkins being the road team in this game, obviously any time that you can get the momentum, if you get the momentum going against you as a road team, it could be detrimental. The kickoff is at 7 o'clock, which is, I think, across the state is a 7 o'clock kickoff. Atkins also, let me throw this at you, they've won the last 2 meetings by a combined 37 points. So these 2 games haven't been close the last 2 times they've played.
Maybe that'll be something Coach Jones can talk about.
One thing about Coach Jones, he picks up. He's got that Saban mentality when it comes to, we got to pick this and we got to pick that to get our guys
bulletin
going.
board material. Yeah.
And I'm sure for the last 2 weeks it hasn't been a lot of fun to be a Lamar Warrior in those practices.
No, I do know that they had a little bonfire thing last night, so they had a team bonding. And moving on to the next game, that Russellville Sylvan Hills game, they had a similar thing going last night with Russellville. They had a community pep rally at the new indoor facility. It was raining, so they weren't able to be at the actual stadium. But they had their coaches show, the radio show, which I thank you, Randy Adkins and Associates, for having us out. He was gracious enough to not only invite us, but to kind of brag on us a little bit. It was, and he called me today to thanks for coming. So that was a really cool thing for them to have and for them to allow us to come out and be a part of. Michelle was out there taking videos and pictures. But that pep rally, and I don't know what Sylvan Hills do. I'm sure they're doing something fun too. It shows that the Cyclone faithful are really excited about. I mean,
Sure.
The moms were dressed up in cheerleading outfits and doing their dance, and it was an interesting night. So I'm expecting that Russellville, with the home at field advantage and everything, they're going to go ahead and win tonight against Sylvan Hills. I'm going to go ahead and predict that right now.
Sylvan Hills comes to the game 3-7 on the season, so it'd be a major disappointment if you lose that game. As the
3-7, and they're going to make the playoffs. That's
3-7. Of course, you got the 6A. You get 6 teams out of each conference to make the playoffs. So couple games, couple wins in the conference, and you're in.
Yeah.
So yes, I think they played a little better toward the end of the year. They come off an 8-point loss to Searcy. I think Searcy and Russellville are real similar teams as far as just how good they are. Couple things about Russellville that stuck out to me. Russellville only allows 17.7 points per game.
Their defense is solid. 3 shutouts.
But let me throw this at you. If you take the 51 points that they allowed to Greenwood, 13.6 points per game in 9 games. So that really is more of a kind of a tale about what they do defensively. Yeah. I look for them to be able to shut down Sylvan Hills with that defense tonight. Of course, I also can tell you that I think that Jaden Palmer, who, if I had to pick a player of the year in the area, Jaden Palmer would probably be it. Jaden Palmer, 59 catches, 867 yards, 8 touchdowns. It's very possible Jaden goes over 1,000 yards tonight. I think he's a kid that colleges are not taking enough looks at. I don't know who he has offers from or anything like that. I'd love to know. But Jaden is a guy that has produced on a 6A level. he's done well. Now, I'm not asking the University of Arkansas or Ole Miss or anybody like that to come down and offer him, but I think he's got some opportunity to play and be effective for somebody. Rhett Atkins, 132 of 234, 1,613 yards, 10 touchdowns. And the winner tonight will play at Marion next week, which I think if Russellville were to win this game, I think that Russellville can go to Marion and win that game, which would put them into a semifinal matchup, most likely with Greenwood.
Against Greenwood, yeah. That's a tough road, man. But I know that Russellville, they don't like Greenwood. They like to go back there and have another shot at them and acquit themselves a little better in that one than they did the first time. But yeah, the Cyclones' defense is the story. I mean, their offense is good. Coach Weaver's an offensive guy, and I like what they've done. Rhett Atkins and Cade England and Jaden Palmer. Man, Jaden Palmer is he's really good. Maybe an Arkansas Tech can holler at him. I don't know who has. I'd have to ask, but. Yeah, he's been a lot of fun. It seems like every week it's 10 catches for 169 yards and a touchdown. It's just like that's his standard line. So he's played very well. But their defense has been really what the strength of the Russellville team has been. 3 shutouts, as we mentioned, 2 of them at least on the road.
Yeah, and you know, last week when they were down 10-0 to Salem Springs, and then all of a sudden, man, that switch flipped on that defense. I don't think they allowed another point on the whole night. I can't remember the exact score, and I will look it up here in just a second to tell exactly. But I know at one point in the fourth quarter it was 23-10. So I know that Russellville, unless Siloam added at the end there, they shut them out for the rest of the game. And that's the thing that they've been able to do pretty much all year long is be able to flip that switch on the defense. And I expect tonight to be no different. I expect a pretty good-sized Russellville win tonight.
Yeah. Once they can get you figured out a little bit, get your tendencies, Coach Wood can set up some stuff to he brings some exotic things and he puts some guys in position to make plays. So that's been a fun thing to watch so far with Coach Wood coming over from Pulaski Academy and then teaming up with Coach Weaver, who's a great offensive mind.
30-16 was the final last night.
So they gave up some jump points at the end.
Yeah, pretty much.
The next game on the slate here, Morrilton hosting Parkview, Little Rock Parkview. Little Rock Parkview, as we mentioned before, it's not your grandfather's Little Rock Parkview. Or maybe your grandpa's. It's not your younger brother's Little Rock Parkview where they weren't any good. They're actually a pretty decent team. But, Brad, you mentioned before that you look for Morrilton to make a run.
I do. I look at the draw. I like it. I like their draw. Now, it's not without, possible hiccups here and there, but I think that Morrilton with Jacoby Criswell, a name that we've mentioned over and over and over again, he's back. And since he's been back, he's had 2 games. He's 35 of 52, 551 yards. I mean, the kid can play, okay?
Playing part-time.
And he's playing part-time. Yes, Dylan White has gotten a little bit of run here even since Criswell come back. There's a reason that Criswell has offers from Ole Miss, Georgia, Mississippi State, along with Arkansas as well. In fact, there was I believe it was after the Farmington game, he actually said that he thought about committing to Arkansas, but just for whatever reason decided to hold off on the commitment. But all that being said, he's a very good player. He's going to play in the SEC most likely, and he shows why he makes that much of a difference for Morrilton. Morrilton, if you go just back a few weeks ago, they played against Valonia. They went into overtime with Valonia, and I think it was the game before Criswell come back. Had they lost that game, they may not even have made the playoffs.
Yeah, and now they've got to run.
And now they've got a chance to run the table and possibly make it into that final game. And, of course, we're going to be here all the way following them and all our other teams that are in the playoffs for sure. But I really like Morrilton's chances tonight, although they've got a very good coach on the other side against him in Brad Bolding. Yeah. Bolding has taken that program at Parkview from nothing to moving it up, and I think Parkview in the next couple of years will make a run. And plus, when we consider like the University of Arkansas, we need Little Rock to be good, so it's good that Brad Bolding is there at Little Rock Parkview. This is a matchup by Hootens that is a number 7 versus a number 9 team in the first round of the playoffs. So this is actually the Hootens game of the week. So in the 5A, and so I really look for this to be a pretty good game. I like Morrilton's chances. I like them to make it to a possible War Memorial though before it's all said and done.
We give Jacoby Criswell a lot of well-deserved credit and pub, but Xavier Clemens.
Xavier
Every
Clemens.
time we say something about Criswell, we'll talk about how well we think he's going to do, and then we look at the stats at the end of the night, and Clemens is like
4 touchdowns.
shining lights. Here's 200 yards, here's 4 touchdowns, here's a great big game for the Morrilton running back, or the all-purpose, all-everything cornerback, junior, 5'8", 160, Xavier Clemens. He's a stud.
191 attempts, 890 yards, and 3 100-yard games. But listen to this, 15 touchdowns.
The guy's a touchdown machine, man.
I mean, when
He's Chris Carter, huh?
When I see 15 touchdowns, I think guys like Darren McFadden.
Yeah.
That was the kind of stuff he did at Arkansas. 15, 18, 16, 17, 18 touchdowns.
Well, that tells you that you're the guy who, when it gets close, either you break a long one, or when it gets close, they're giving you the ball because they trust you. You're going to get it in.
But also, you got to say something with Chris or with Morrilton is that Morrilton has such a balanced offense. And just think about this. I'm just looking at their numbers right now. They've had one quarterback throw for 466, one quarterback for 551, which is Criswell in 2 games, and then Dylan White has thrown for almost 1,000 yards this season. They've thrown for almost 2,000 yards, and
with 3 different quarterbacks,
and they've rushed for 1,337.
It's balanced.
So it's pick your poison with Morrilton, and of course this is what Morrilton was supposed to be from day one. This was a team that was picked number 2 in the state at the first of the season. This was a team that was picked to win the 5A West. They've dealt with injuries and all the other things that have surrounded the program. They've been able to weather the storm. Now they have an opportunity. I think they have a good draw. I think Blytheville is the number 1 team. They may not even make it out, by the way, of their first game. But Blytheville is the number 1 team across from them. And Blytheville, believe it or not, Blytheville was out of the playoff. This is so crazy how this worked. They had such a tie-break system that Blytheville was out of the playoffs last week. They won their game, and the people in front of them lost to the point that they won the conference. They were the 5th seed. They go all the way to the 1 seed, and they end up being...
So everybody beat everybody in that conference.
Exactly. It ended up being a jumble as far as standings go, but Blytheville was the one that came out on top. So I like Morrilton's opportunity to possibly, maybe next weekend go to Blytheville and win if they win tonight. I think Parkview might be a tougher game.
Moving on, Dardanelle, Jonesboro, Westside, first ever meeting between these 2 teams, and both of these teams, now Dardanelle is a little more balanced when their quarterback's not hurt and out for the year. We'll talk a little bit about that, but Dardanelle likes to run the ball quite a bit too. Jonesboro, Westside, though, Brad, you mentioned some of the stats that they had. They are pretty heavy on one side of the ball.
They're a running team, man. They're absolutely a running team. I've said that if I'm going to be Dardanelle, I'm going to put a lot of people in the box, and I'm going to say throw the ball. I know that the Dardanelle coaches, if they're watching this right now, would say, okay, we can do that. The question now is for Dardanelle, what do they do without Jordan Metcalf? Jordan Metcalf is a guy that's a little bit underrated, I think, when it comes to that Dardanelle team. I've said it over and over again with Dardanelle. They don't have anybody that's necessarily a superstar on that team, but a bunch of well-coached kids.
Yep.
Jordan Metcalf did a good job of leading the charge with that team. He was a very good general on the field, a guy that would, make tough runs. He got a play of the week. I guess it was last week he got the play of the week, bouncing off tacklers and ended up getting a 25-yard touchdown.
Yep.
He's a guy that is just, he's the straw that stirs the drink. Now they've got guys around him, and they've got good players. Don't get me wrong when I say there's no superstars on that team. There's a bunch. I mean, they've got a bunch of good players on that football team.
Yep.
And so, who's going to be able to step in and play quarterback? That's going to be the issue for Dardanelle tonight.
I expect Dardanelle to get a win tonight. Did you mention the number, the Jonesboro Westside rushing number?
422 yards a game.
400 yards a game. So it's going to be a short game. It's going to get over quickly. I expect that Dardanelle will be able to hold Jonesboro Westside under that average. That's probably not going out on a limb to say in the playoffs that you're going to hold somebody below their average. And I'll go ahead and predict it right now. Dardanelle wins tonight.
All right.
Dardanelle gets the win against Jonesboro Westside. And then moving on down the line here, Pottsville, Robinson. That's going to be a tough one. Robinson on the road there, Pottsville. I know they had an emotional lift last week at home on senior night against Subiaco. And Subiaco is not Pulaski Robinson by any means, but they had that Drake Manus senior night walkout, all that happened, and then they were able to just run off on Subiaco. But tonight, Brad, it's a tough one at Robinson.
Robinson wins the 7-4A last week. 7-4A, if you look around the state, is the best conference in the 4A. The state champion last year come out of it in Arkadelphia. You know, this year they had 5, 6 really good teams. So there was one team that didn't even make the playoffs. They've got really good coaches in that area. Robinson was able to come out of the jumble a little bit in that conference as well and be able to step up and be the 1 seed. This is why Pottsville has to travel to Robinson. Of course, it would have been a whole lot of a difference, but really Dardanelle's loss to Mena didn't help Pottsville last week at all. But at the same time, you're really looking at the difference between Robinson and Nashville, I believe, or maybe it's Bauxite, one of those two that – you know, Pottsville would have had to travel to. It's a tall task for Pottsville to win this game. Now, I will say this. Pottsville is a 28-point underdog by Hootens, okay? So I think that Pottsville could go and give them a better game than that.
You want me to make a prediction?
Let's do it.
Pottsville beats that prediction, and they lose by less than 21 if that's the case.
I would love to see, you know.
It won't be 28.
It will be one of those games that
I'm going out on a limb
it would be a major upset in the playoffs for them to be able to win that game. But, you know, stranger things have happened, and Pottsville has had their successes against Robinson in the past.
Yep,
Robinson has real similar teams. You know, every year they've got 2 or 3 really good athletes that they depend on. This year, apparently, they have a pretty good vertical passing game that they throw. And so I feel like that, you know, Pottsville, they're going to have their hands full. There's no doubt. This is one of those games that you just feel like that if Pottsville just comes out with emotion and they just throw caution to the wind, nobody expects them to win the game to begin with, then, you know, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, Pottsville's going to have to run the ball very well, obviously. I don't think they're going to abandon the tee. I know they've kind of spread it out from time to time. This is not one of those games where you're going to want to try to out-athlete somebody. You're going to want to try to run it right at them and hope that they can't stop it. And so if you're Pottsville, you're hoping that this game's a short one because the clock keeps running because you're running the ball, getting first downs, or you're able to just grind out the clock and get a win that way. But like you mentioned, Brad, that's going to be a tall task.
It is a tall task. They've got a lot of athletes all over the field. But, you know, Pottsville's played a tough schedule this year. There's no doubt. So, like Coach Russ said last week on the show, I don't think it's going to be anything that they haven't necessarily seen.
Yeah. That's why they play teams like Newport at the beginning of the year.
Exactly. And, you know, they were able to beat Newport early. You know, Pottsville is a team that has enough athletes on the field that they could get the job done. Do they believe that, though? That's going to be the question. You've always got to believe when you go out on the field. So start well, take care of the ball, milk that clock for everything it's worth. Try to keep this game under 30 points. That's the key for Pottsville tonight.
In our final game, obviously, Hector is one of our favorite teams. They've got a bye. They don't have to play this week. So our final game that's going to take place on the field tonight, Danville, Yaleville Summit. First game ever between these two teams. Danville kind of rounding into shape at the right time toward the end of the year. They've got some impressive numbers that you looked up as well, Brad.
Yeah. Preston Donnell, is that right, Preston?
Yep.
Donnell, 104 of 181, 1,532 yards.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Donnell, yes.
Donnell.
16 touchdowns and 7 picks. Quentin Tolbert, man, guy that we probably don't talk about enough.
No,
and as far as I can
stud.
tell, in our area, he's the only 1,000-yard running back that we have. 1,000 yards on 125 carries. He's averaging almost 10 yards a carry. 13
That's Reggie Bush
touchdowns.
numbers right there.
The kids can play. And I'm going to tell you right now, man, if there's – please – Coach Crane, if you're watching, or anybody from Danville, I'm not trying to put the hex on you, but if there's a game in this area that is almost a guaranteed victory, it's this one right here. Yaleville comes out of probably the weakest conference in 3A, even though they've played a little bit better. You look at their wins that they've had coming into this game. I mean, you know, the likes of Marshall, teams like that. I mean, Hector run all over Marshall. Not to say that Hector, there's anything bad with it. I'm just saying Hector pounded them. That's the types of teams that Yaleville has beaten to get here. One of those conferences that probably has maybe one good team, maybe 2 good teams in it. I look for Danville to be able to win this game and win it pretty handily. The problem with Danville's draw is they get Smackover next.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
And Fighting Jonathan Monicas, huh?
Yeah, the Fighting Jonathan Monicas are pretty good, and I believe he actually has a cousin on that team that is a junior that's pretty soft.
There are like 2 people watching this who are actually going to understand that.
Right.
Former Razorback basketball player. Anyway.
From Smackover, Arkansas, yes. There's also Clyde Smackover Scott. That's probably the only 2 Razorbacks that ever. No, Jordan Jones actually is from
right
Smackover.
now.
Wow.
Buckaroo.
So they actually, for a town that size, they do pretty good. So anyway, but Smackover is one of the best teams in 3A. That's or maybe the best team in 3A. But I'll tell you one thing about it. Once Danville wins tonight, which they will win tonight,
there you go. That's how you make a prediction, Brad.
They won't be afraid of going to Smackover. I promise you that.
They'll put a smack over on them, won't they?
Lay the smack down.
That's a pretty terrible joke.
Oh.
That's a pretty terrible joke by me. I'm just gonna go ahead and quit with that one. That's all we have. That's all we have for you today. Now Hector got that bye, so next week they'll get the winner of, I forget who it is
Mount
because I don't
Ida
have the bracket.
Bearden.
Mount Ida. They'll probably get. We'll show them what they've won.
Right.
A chance to play against one of the best teams in the state.
One thing that we can say for tonight is it's going to feel like football weather.
It is. It's going to get cold. Starting tonight and into tomorrow, it's going to be really, really cold. So
it's going to feel like football. 36 degrees.
That's a nice little pitch that Brad did to Maddie to get him to get that graphic up there.
I'm going to have to get my old gloves that work on the phone because it's going to be cold. 36 degrees at kickoff. That means it's going to be colder. I'm going to have to break out the old hat because, man, this old bald head, man, it just doesn't do good with the cold weather.
Oh,
so, anyway, but, yeah, I'm looking forward to be – oh, looky here, man.
Thank you to our content partners with KARK.
I'm looking forward to being at Lamar tonight. It's going to be a good time. And, I look for a lot of wins in this area. I look for – obviously, somebody from the area is going to win in the Lamar-Atkins game.
Yeah.
Russellville, I look for them to win. Morrilton, I feel like they're going to win. Dardanelle has a really good shot at winning. You worry about the quarterback situation there. So I feel like that you've still got some teams that are going to be moving forward. Obviously, Hector, they're going to beat the bye tonight. They're going to win.
Hector's going to win. Hector, I guarantee you they'll be playing next week. Guaranteed.
That's a 4-degree guarantee right there.
We'll get all these games next week though. We'll leave you with this. Tonight, Russellville, Sylvan Hills, Morrilton, Parkview, Lamar, Atkins in our St. Mary's Regional Health System Game of the Week, Dardanelle, Jonesboro, Westside, Pottsville at Robinson, Danville, Yellville, Summit, and Hector versus the bye.
Hector versus the bye. Hector's going to have their hands full next week, most likely with Mount Ida. But you know what? Let's not talk about that right now. They get a chance to move on to the second round of the playoffs, which they're already in. We're glad for them. And so we'll see what happens throughout the week into next week. And, we're going to be here again next week having a show. And, when you can play on the weekend of Thanksgiving, that's when you can really say that you had one heck of a year.
For sure.
We've talked about this quite a bit, Mark, about home teams, home playoff games. Man, we've got 7 teams in this area out of 11 schools that we covered that got home playoff games. Now, I will say that some parts of the season it didn't look like that was going to happen.
No, you're right.
But throughout the season, or at the end of the season here, we've had teams that have stepped up. Just like Hector was one of those teams when we lost to Magazine. I don't know. Morrilton, same way. They kind of come on here at the end. There's been teams all throughout the season here that we kind of thought, oh, maybe not. But here we are now, 7 of the 11 teams in the area, 8 teams making the playoffs. We've had a great year in the River Valley, and we expect to be able to do this a couple more weeks at least.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all we're going to have for you today. We'll be back on Monday to talk about some wins for these teams. And hopefully we'll be able to see and hear from you and your great deer kills on the first weekend of Modern Gun season. So, hey, send us your pictures on River Valley Now's Facebook page, and we'll show them. We'll tell everybody about the kills of the week. So, all right, that's all for Brad. I'm Mark saying so long. We'll see you Monday. Enjoy your night.